Welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at Nick Cave.
Nick Cave, yeah.
And how his music and his whole outlook on life and art have been shaped by loss.
Yeah. Really by grief.
By grief, yeah. And kind of how those two things intersect, which is something I think...
A fascinating space.
Really fascinating and really relevant, I think, to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And the material we have for this is a couple of BBC articles all about Nick Cave.
Cool.
Yeah.
So before and after?
Before and after, yeah.
The loss of his sons.
Exactly. So I think it's interesting.
It's heavy stuff, but...
It's heavy stuff.
I think it's going to be a good conversation.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it's interesting because the way that...
well, it's more than just music.
Yeah, it's more than just music.
It's whole perspective.
His whole perspective. Yeah, his whole approach to art.
Yeah.
And what it means to make art and what it means to...
have a purpose, you know?
Yeah, what matters.
Yeah.
So I think one of the interesting things too is that the articles kind of paint this picture of Cave's creative process.
Before the loss.
Before the loss.
Okay.
As being almost like this ritual.
Yeah, it's like clockwork.
Yeah.
You know, he would go to his office every day and shut the door and just kind of disappear into this world.
Yeah, and he seemed to find...
But it was reliable.
Reliable, yeah.
It's a constant...
It was always there.
Yeah, like...
You know, it was the thing he could always count on.
Yeah, and there's a quote here I think that's really interesting where he says...
Oh, yeah?
Art was kind of, at the end of the day, everything.
Wow.
Which is...
That's a big statement.
It's a big statement. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
Like, could you even fathom a life where that wasn't true?
I mean, at that point in his life, you know, it seemed like it was everything, you know, and then...
It's his whole world.
It was his whole world, and then as we know...
Yeah, his world changed pretty dramatically. First, in 2015, when his 15-year-old son, Arthur, died in a cliff jumping accident.
Tragic.
And then again in 2022 when his eldest son, Jethro, passed away at 31.
Yeah. I mean, it's just unimaginable.
Unimaginable, right?
That kind of loss and how it's clear that it completely shifted his perspective.
Yeah.
Like...
It had to.
Yeah.
You know, you can't go through something like that and not be changed by it.
And, I mean, the articles talk about this.
Well, he talks about it, too.
Yeah, they talk about how he was actually repelled.
By his work.
By his own work.
Yeah.
After Arthur's death.
Right.
He found it.
Like almost indulgent.
Indulgent.
And kind of inappropriate in the face of this, like...
This huge grief.
This enormous grief.
Yeah. It's almost like, how could I possibly care about this?
Yeah, how can you think about this?
When this other thing is so big.
Yeah, this is so present.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting how...
What makes you think about how personal art is?
It is incredibly personal.
Yeah.
You know, and before... He had this idea
that it was everything.
That it was everything.
Yeah.
That it was the ultimate purpose.
The be all end all.
Right. And then suddenly when faced with this kind of loss, it just seemed trivial in a way, you know, and it really forced him to kind of confront his own beliefs about art and what it meant and what its purpose was.
But the ground shifted.
Yeah, absolutely.
And on top of that, just dealing with the very human experience of grief.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's the core of it, you know? He's going through this incredibly painful experience.
Yeah.
And it's reflected, I think, in his work, but also in how he talks about his life now, you know?
Yeah.
He's talked about finding joy in being a husband.
And a grandfather.
Yeah.
Roles that maybe didn't have...
the same weight before.
The same kind of weight before his son's deaths.
And it's not that he didn't care before.
Right.
It's just that...
the focus shifted.
Yeah. And there's this quote that really struck me from after Arthur's death.
Okay.
He wrote, "Grief and love are forever intertwined." And
powerful.
It is. It's like...
so simple.
So simple, but it's so profound.
Very profound.
Because...
it's true.
It is true. And it's acknowledging that, you know, love and grief are...
two sides of the same coin.
Two sides of the same coin. You can't have one without...
the potential for the other.
The potential for the other.
Yeah.
But it also suggests that there's a beauty in that connection, you know?
That it's the depth of the love that makes the grief...
that makes the grief so intense.
So profound.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's vice versa.
Exactly.
And I think that kind of gets to the heart of...
what we're looking at.
What we're talking about here, right? Like, how do we make sense of these
big,
huge emotions. Yeah.
Especially when they're so
intertwined.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it seems like for Cave, part of that was this process of reevaluating what was important to him.
Yeah.
It wasn't that art became meaningless,
right,
but it took on a different role in his life.
Yeah.
He's talked about how responsibility to family should be the driving force behind creativity.
Which is interesting.
Which is fascinating.
Because it kind of flips the script on that whole...
The tortured artist.
Tortured artist.
Sacrificing everything for their art.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it makes you think about your own motivations.
Totally.
Yeah.
Like, what is the engine behind your creativity?
Yeah.
Your work.
What's pushing you forward?
Yeah.
Is it...
What are you responsible to?
Yeah. And it's not to say that personal satisfaction or ambition are bad. Of course not.
But it just adds.
It just adds another layer to that conversation.
Yeah. What if?
Yeah. What if we create not just for ourselves, but out of a sense of responsibility to something bigger than ourselves? Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think is...
That's an interesting way to look at it.
It is. It's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah. And for Cave, that sense of responsibility seems to extend beyond family.
Yeah.
Too, because he's got this online platform, the Red Hand Files.
Right.
Where he answers questions.
From fans.
From fans. Yeah.
A lot of which are about grief and loss.
Yeah. It's like he's become this...
unlikely advisor.
Yeah.
Using his own experience to try to...
help others navigate.
Yeah, other people navigate their own pain.
Which I think is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, considering he's still
grieving.
Actively grieving himself.
Yeah, there's a real generosity in that.
Yeah.
This willingness to be vulnerable and share his own struggles in the hopes that it might help someone else.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it speaks to the idea that even in the midst of
immense pain,
this really immense pain, there can be a beauty in connection, in reaching out and offering support
to others.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a powerful idea.
It is.
And speaking of connection, he's going on tour soon, right?
He is. Yeah, the articles mention that he's coming to North America
this spring. Yeah.
Yeah, so it makes you wonder
what that's going to be like.
Yeah, what that's going to be like for him.
Given everything
that's happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Will the stage become this space for processing this grief?
Yeah.
Or maybe even a temporary escape from it.
Right. Or will it be both?
Yeah. Yeah.
I
think it's hard to say, but either way, it's going to be an incredibly emotional experience for him and for his fans. So I'm really curious to hear more about that. But I think we should pause here.
Okay.
And pick this thread up in part 2.
That's good.
Of our deep dive.
Yeah, we've got a lot more to uncover.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to how his music has evolved.
Yeah.
And what his legacy might be.
Yeah.
So.
All right, so stay tuned for part 2.
We'll be right back.
Okay, so picking up where we left off, and one thing that really stood out to me from those articles was Cave's comment about retiring.
Oh, yeah.
When he can no longer do knee drops on stage.
Oh, yeah. Classic Nick Cave.
Classic Nick Cave.
Always got to have a little bit of humor.
Yeah.
Even when talking about
heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it also speaks to a certain self-awareness.
Yeah.
He's acknowledging
the
realities of getting older.
Of aging.
Yeah, the physical limitations of being a performer.
Yeah, he's not 20 anymore.
And maybe even poking a little fun at the rock star persona.
A little bit. Yeah, for sure.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Like, hey.
I'm human too.
I'm human.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder too how his music may have changed.
Oh, absolutely.
Since his son's deaths.
Yeah.
I mean, grief has a way of
seeping into everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Think about his album Skeleton Tree.
Yeah.
Which he wrote after Arthur's death.
Right.
There's this rawness.
Yeah.
This vulnerability that you can just feel in both the music and the lyrics.
Yeah.
It's very stripped back.
Yeah.
Almost minimalist at times.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think allows the emotional weight of the words
to really hit
home.
You can almost feel the grief in
the spaces between the notes.
Yeah. And then there's Ghostine,
right,
which came out a few years later.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a companion piece.
It is.
To Skeleton Tree.
It's like the second part of that story.
Yeah, there was this sense of searching.
Yeah, there's a searching and a yearning.
Yeah. Trying to find meaning.
Yeah, trying to find solace and meaning.
In the face of this.
In the face of this enormous loss.
Yeah.
It's a really beautiful album.
Yeah, it is.
But it's also heartbreaking.
Yeah.
you know?
So it sounds like sonically, lyrically,
Yeah.
his music has really kind of evolved.
Yeah, it's evolved to reflect these experiences.
Yeah, and I think that evolution is kind
I
of...
think that's part of what keeps his work so compelling.
Yeah.
You know, he's not afraid to explore these
difficult emotions.
These difficult emotions, yeah.
To be vulnerable.
To be vulnerable. And I think that really resonates
with listeners.
With listeners, especially those who might be going through
something similar.
Something similar, yeah.
And you see that reflected in the Red Hand Files, too.
Oh, yeah.
Like, reading through those questions, it's clear that he's connecting with people.
On a deep level.
On a really deep level.
Yeah.
And there's this quote where he says, "What I really want to try and do is let people know in some way that it doesn't have to be thus. And that there is a world beyond the grief that they feel."
That's huge.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And it's coming from someone who's
been there.
Yeah. You know, and not from some
guru on a mountaintop. It's like, this is someone
who's walked through fire.
Yeah. And knows the depths of it. Of despair.
Yeah.
But has also found a way
to keep going.
Yeah. And to find meaning.
Yeah. And even joy.
On the other side.
of it. Yeah.
And I think that's what resonates with people.
I think so too.
This sense of shared humanity. Of knowing that you're not alone.
You're not alone in your pain. Yeah. And it gets back to that idea of responsibility we were talking about.
Yeah. It's like he's found a new purpose.
Yeah, he's found a new purpose in using his platform, his experience.
To help others. Yeah.
It's like his art has taken on this
new dimension.
Of like connection.
Yeah, a way to connect.
And offer solace, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe that's part of his legacy too.
Maybe that's the real legacy.
It's not just the music.
It's
the way he's used it.
Yeah, that's the way he's used his art.
To grapple with these big questions.
Yeah, to grapple with life's big questions.
And to connect with others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, so we keep mentioning this tour.
Oh, yeah. He's hitting North America this spring.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how his live shows have evolved.
Right. Will they be more subdued?
Yeah.
More reflective?
I'm imagining there will be a certain heaviness to it.
Probably.
But also this incredible energy and connection between him and the audience.
I think there's always been that connection.
Yeah.
But I imagine it'll be even amplified.
More amplified now.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the music either.
Right. He creates this whole experience with his shows.
Yeah, the lighting.
The staging.
Yeah.
It all creates this really immersive,
like a ritual.
Almost ritualistic experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing.
It's like he's creating this space.
Yeah.
Where people can come together.
Yeah. And collectively process their own
emotions,
their own experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what's so powerful about live music.
It is, especially in this context, you know?
Yeah.
It's a shared experience that transcends language.
Yeah.
And can be incredibly cathartic.
Yeah.
You know?
So you've obviously followed Cave's music for a long time.
I have, yeah.
If someone was coming to it completely fresh, what would you recommend they listen to?
Oh, that's a great question.
To get a sense of his range.
You know, it's tough because his catalog is
so vast.
So vast and so varied. But I think The Boatman's Call from 1997 is a really good starting point.
Okay.
It's a beautiful album.
Yeah.
Very introspective, and it really showcases his songwriting abilities and his ability to just convey
raw emotion.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so solid recommendation.
Yeah.
And from there maybe jump into like Skeleton Tree and Ghostine.
Yeah, to hear how the sound and the lyrical themes
have evolved.
Yeah.
Post-loss,
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that would give somebody a pretty good
overview of his journey, both musically
and personally.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Now, the articles touch on his current project, the Red Hand Files.
Right.
And he actually started this back in 2018.
He did, yeah.
As this online platform where he's connecting with fans.
Yeah, and engaging with these questions on a really personal level.
Like he's tackling everything from
love and loss
to politics,
spirituality.
Yeah. And it's kind of amazing that he takes the time.
It is.
To respond to these questions.
It is.
Often with really thoughtful, in-depth answers.
Yeah, he puts a lot of care into it.
Yeah.
It seems.
And I think it speaks to his desire to
Yeah, to connect with people.
Connect, yeah.
And share his perspective. And maybe offer some guidance or solace.
Yeah, he's really opened himself up.
He has.
In a way that's pretty rare.
Yeah, I think it's rare for someone...
For someone in his position.
In his position.
Yeah.
To be so... Open and vulnerable with his audience.
Yeah, and it seems to have really resonated with people.
It has.
I mean, he's received thousands of questions.
Thousands, yeah, from all over the world.
From all over the world.
Yes.
And I think it's because he's not afraid to be...
honest.
Vulnerable and even...
humorous at times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's not trying to be this guru figure.
Right, he's just sharing his thoughts.
Sharing his thoughts and experiences as
a fellow human.
Fellow human being.
Yeah. It's almost like he's inviting people into a conversation.
Right.
Rather than delivering pronouncements.
Yeah, exactly.
From on high.
It's not a lecture.
Yeah. It's a dialogue.
Dialogue, yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's what makes the Red Hand File so...
compelling.
It feels genuine.
Yeah.
Authentic and
relatable.
Yeah. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
From Cave's personal journey
Yeah.
and creative evolution to his online platform and his upcoming tour.
Right.
But before we wrap things up, I want to circle back to something you said earlier.
Okay.
You mentioned that Cave's perspective on responsibility in art resonated with you.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that a bit?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
What does that idea mean to you, and how might it apply to someone who isn't,
right,
a world-famous musician?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, for Cave, that shift obviously came after experiencing this profound loss.
Right.
But I think the core idea, that we can create from a place of responsibility, not just self-expression, is relevant, I think, for everyone.
So it's not about abandoning your passions or ignoring your own creative impulses.
It's more about,
But maybe finding a way to connect those impulses to something larger.
Exactly.
Than yourself.
Yeah, it's about kind of asking yourself, how can my work serve others? How can it contribute to something
meaningful
in the world?
Yeah.
And that something can be anything, really. It can be your family.
Your community.
A social cause you care about. It's about finding that intersection between... Your passion and your purpose.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
It's almost like finding that sweet spot.
Yeah.
Where your unique talents and interests can be used to...
make a difference.
Yeah, make a positive impact.
Yeah. Yeah, and it doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be huge.
Some grand world-changing gesture.
Right.
It could be as simple as...
like helping a friend.
Mentoring a colleague.
Yeah.
Creating something that brings joy to others.
Yeah. I think that's what's so inspiring about Cave's story.
It is.
It shows that even in the face of this immense pain and loss, you can still find a way to create, to connect, and to contribute something meaningful.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Nick Cave, what are some key takeaways you hope listeners will walk away with?
Well, I think first and foremost, I hope they gain a deeper understanding of Cave as an artist and as a human being. He's someone who has grappled with
some of life's biggest challenges.
Some of life's toughest challenges.
Yeah.
And his work, I think, reflects
that struggle.
Yeah. In a really honest and powerful way.
And it's not just about the darkness either.
Yeah.
There's also this incredible resilience.
Yeah.
This ability to find beauty and meaning even in the midst of grief.
Absolutely. And I think that's a message.
That we can all relate to.
Yeah. Regardless of our own personal circumstances.
Yeah. Any final thoughts for our listeners? As they continue to explore Cave's music and legacy?
I would just encourage them to keep an open mind and an open heart. Cave's work can be challenging at times, but it's also incredibly rewarding.
Yeah.
It asks us to confront these difficult questions, to embrace vulnerability, and to find connection.
In unexpected places.
Beautifully
said.
Thanks.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive.
All right.
Thanks for joining us as we explored the life loss and creative evolution of Nick Cave.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time.